About 9 years ago, a group of leaders out here who work in the youth development field, who are working with young people, started to hear more and more stories about gang involvement on the East End, and not necessarily some real high-end gang involvement, but kids making some really at-risk, dangerous choices for themselves. And
this committee that we're part of has been putting these conferences on the East End for about 8 years now.
So we brought a few of us together and we started to take a look at what's happening with our young people, what's happening with our adults in this community. We started to see some gang involvement, we started to see some gang graffiti happen, and we said it's time that we bring those folks together and let's get ahead of this and begin to do some real good education about it.
And it was something we felt was timely and necessary. And since our focus is prevention, it was a natural thing for us to want to get involved with.
So a group of social workers, counselors, youth agencies, law enforcement, and faith-based agencies, we came together and we put on the first conference. And what we found immediately was there was a need for it, and people asked us for more. And so now we've done about 8 conferences that we hold every year with attendance that ranges from 100 to 300 folks. And what we really want to do is get education to them on different programs. What are the current trends we're seeing? What are the current challenges we're faced when it comes to young people today? And how can we give people who work with young people, who work in communities, the best, most effective strategies to help develop healthy, positive young people, to help develop healthy programs in their communities, and begin to make a shift in the change of what we see happening in the trends with young people.
Stuff that goes on with gangs is also some stuff we see in the media. It's well publicized. Kids see it, they pick it up, and they sort of emulate it. And so our approach is we want to make sure, number one, that the folks who are working with kids, that the people who are raising kids in our community know what gang behavior is and what the indicators are, so that they can be aware and always sort of ready to recognize it, and so that they can kind of understand the difference between gang behavior and emulating gang behavior.
In highlighting today's conference, we've brought in a great keynote speaker, nationally renowned speaker. His name is Milton Korea, who's going to really challenge us as people who work within this industry. How are we really reaching young people?
He's interesting, he's funny, he keeps your attention, but I think the most important thing about him is that he relates his message to every person in the audience. Everybody, whether you're a young person or a parent or a teacher or a grandparent, his message resonates with everybody.
You know, it was really good to come and have a chance to go to schools here. I came here last year and just spoke at the Gang Awareness Conference, and came back this year and had a chance to go and speak in some of the schools just to talk to the kids and get the kids to think not only about gangs, and talk about gangs at the schools, talk about the drug problem, and get them to understand, because one of the mistakes I think we made over the years is whenever we talk to kids about drugs and alcohol, we basically talked about one thing, and that is drunk driving crashes. And understand those are terrible and they're awful and all that, but there are other things that are connected to drugs and alcohol that we have to start talking about.
So today's conference, we're focusing on a couple of different things. One is, what are the current trends in drug use, and how does that connect to gangs?
What we're starting to see is a lot of gangs are moving away from what we would call the violent street crime, like the drug dealing, like the armed robbery and that kind of thing, and they're moving towards what we would call white collar or cyber crime.
We're also doing some workshops on mentoring and talking with some folks who are actively right now working with some youth reentry programs.
For kids in America today, number one cause of death of boys 12 to 19 is drug and alcohol related accidents. Number 2 is murder. Number 3 is suicide. But guess what? Most suicides, the person who attempts suicide is under influence of alcohol. Most murders, alcohol or drugs are involved in that. So we got to talk about it.
So there's a definite connection to be made between gang activity and drug use and sellers and buyers. And what's more important is taking a look at the risk factors that are associated. The risk factors that are associated for joining a gang are very much the same risk factors that are connected to drug and alcohol use.
And so what I try to do with kids is do connected issues tied to this, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's domestic violence. I mean, so many kids I meet have people in their families they've watched go back and forth to jail, mostly tied to drugs and alcohol. And I try to get kids to see that and get them to understand that since you see this in your world, not something you see on TV, but you see this with people in your family, then you got to make some adjustments to how you live your life so that you won't get caught up in that.
And when we talk about young people, what do young people want? They want to belong to a group. And you talk to any young person anywhere, and that's what they're going to tell you. Gangs offer young people exactly what they're looking for. There's money involved, there's an excitement involved, there's a risk factor involved, but the sense of belonging is involved.
And so I think it's important for schools, important for parents, important for the community to find a way to let all kids feel included.
Very much the same when we talk about drugs and alcohol, all the same things that are very attractive about it. There's a risk factor involved, you're part of a larger group that's engaged in a behavior, you have the sense of belonging, and so all those same mechanisms go hand in hand. So whether it's behaviorally or whether it's the combination of how gangs relate to drugs and alcohol, it's all interconnected, and our young people look for those different avenues, unfortunately, to find their place in the world.
Every school that I went to here in the Long Island area, at the end I asked the kids a series of questions. I asked them, how many of someone in your family who has gotten a divorce because of drugs or alcohol? Then I said, how many have someone in your family who's lost a job because of drugs or alcohol? How many have someone who's going to jail because of drugs or alcohol? And then finally, how many have someone in your family who's died because of either drugs, alcohol, or gangs? And when I asked those questions, I then have all those kids stand up who said yes. At every school we went to, when I had the final tally of the kids standing up, if they had one of those things in their family, it was over 90% of the kids at every school who stood up. So that says that this stuff is here and in their families.
It's difficult sometimes to think about what can the average person do to make a difference. If you're not in this field, if you're not teaching, what can you do? But I want to talk clearly about things you can do as individuals. One of those simple things is mentor a young person.
What we have to look at as parents, what we have to look at as school people, as people in the community, is that those gangs then may be looking for a different kind of kid. They aren't looking for the street tough who can be on the street corner selling dope anymore. But a lot of the gangs are looking for kids who have computer savvy. They're looking for kids who are bright. They're looking for kids who have internet savvy. You know, a lot of the marketing now, the gangs, is done through the internet.
The truth is, there's a lot of young people who really need some good, solid adult mentors out there.
Research that we've done in talking with kids, that there's a few parenting strategies that are really simple but very effective. They are to set boundaries, set limits for your kids, and make sure that they know what they are. The second one is to enforce those boundaries when they've been exceeded. You know, with your kids, if you told your kid not to do something and they do it, then there needs to be a consequence. The third is to know who your children's friends are, to ask them where they're going when they go out. And the fifth one is to have a family dinner as often as you can.
I just try to get kids to look at this in terms of their family and how has this stuff really impacted their family over the years.
This conference and the feedback we've received over the years has really told us that we've done our job in getting people to become aware.
I think the average person can help a lot by basically just being aware.